Sheep and Goat Judgment of the Nations Part 5. The Identity of the 102 Sheep Nations. We have been looking at the final judgment of the nations by Jesus in Matthew chapter 25. In my opinion, the Bible indicates that there are 153 nations altogether. 51 of these will be classed as goat nations and will not pass the judgment. The remaining 102 nations are sheep nations and will have an eternal future. The sheep nations fall into two categories. Firstly, the 58 nations, which are listed in a table of nations in Genesis chapter 10. This table lists 70 nations, but 12 of them were Canaanite nations and were under a curse. Secondly, the 44 nations descended from Abraham's two legitimate wives, Sarah and Keturah. The nations descended from his concubine, Hagar, are not sheep nations. Abraham's name means father of nations. The only new nations that God created after the original nations listed in Genesis chapter 10 came through Abraham. The following table shows more detail. So we have 40 nations that came through Noah's son Japheth, who are basically the Indo-European nations. We have 26 nations who came through Noah's son Shem. They're basically the Jews and the Middle Eastern nations. The word Semitic comes from the word Shem. Then we have 18 nations from Noah's son Ham. These are the African and Asian nations. This number does not include the nations descended from Canaan and his sons. Then we have Abraham's descendants. He had a legitimate son through Sarah called Isaac. Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau. 12 nations came through Jacob, that is Israel, and 16 nations from Esau, the Edomites. Then we have Abraham's descendants through Keturah, that's another 16 nations. And this makes up the 102 sheep nations in all. It's interesting to note that there are currently 156 nations in the world with a population of over 1 million. It seems that the modern nations in the world are starting to mirror the original 153 nations. About 50 of these nations are officially Islamic states, so the world today is starting to reflect the 102 to 51 split between the sheep nations and the goat nations. However, as far as specifics are concerned, the issue has not been decided yet. The state religion of Egypt is currently Islam, but according to the Bible, Egypt will at some time turn to the Lord. Also, Iran is an Islamic state, but may also turn to the Lord, as it does not historically belong to any of the goat nation families. There may also be some non-Islamic nations that turn to Islam in the future and become goat nations. I've tried to show that it is the Islamic nations that are the goat nations. It may be asked why this is, because there are many other nations that are either secular or follow other religions than Christianity. The major reason is that one of the yardsticks that Jesus uses in his judgment of the nations in Matthew chapter 25 is how the nations have treated his brethren, i.e. the Jews. Only the Islamic faith actually opposes Jews and Christians as a tenet of its faith. All Jews and Christians, the natural and spiritual brethren of Jesus, are expected to convert to the Islamic faith or die. The land of Israel itself is regarded as being assigned to Islam. Consequently, any nation that declares itself an Islamic state cannot pass the judgment of the nations. No Muslim can accept that God has a son, as the Quran denies this. This is the exact point that Satan tested Jesus on in the wilderness. Matthew chapter 4 verse 3. And when the tempter came to him, he said, If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. Jesus always said that he was the Son of God, which is why the Pharisees accused him of blasphemy. Anyone who accepts the Islamic faith is automatically saying that Jesus was a liar. Any nation that accepts Islam will be judged by the Son of God himself. The 102 sheep nations will all accept Jesus as Lord during the millennial period and will follow him during that age. At the end of the 1,000-year millennium, Judgment Day will happen. The nations of those who are saved will continue into the age of the new heaven and the new earth, and of the new Jerusalem. Revelation chapter 21, verses 22 to 24. And I saw no temple therein, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it, and the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon, to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it. And the Lamb is the light thereof, and the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light of it, and the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honour into it. So there is an eternal future for both individuals and nations that follow Jesus. Thank you for watching. If you found this video interesting, you can find more information at prophecy-workshop.com.